Labrit everyone. My name is Adrien Michel. I'm working at the European Commission in the unit in charge of energy efficiency financing. And today I will have the pleasure to briefly present what is the EU panorama when it comes to energy renovation of buildings. So it's not only about the money, although it's quite a lot of it, but it's also about the enabling framework that the European Commission has put forward with a number of directives plus initiatives that will allow to increase the level of investments for energy efficiency, hopefully. You probably know what the challenge is, but let me briefly remind it to you. When we have developed an impact assessment for the new to come 2040 climate targets, which include energy efficiency target, we have estimated the investment needs for the energy efficiency sector alone to more than 330 billion euros per year for the current decade, and that would grow up to more than 360 billion per year in the next decade. Clearly, this is one of the largest, if not the largest, identified investment needs within the energy sector. So we can really say that energy efficiency is the main priority for the years to come if we want to succeed in the energy transition. And faced to that, it is hard to estimate the current state of play and the magnitude of investments, because you know that there's a high proportion of private investments that are coming from households, for example, or small industries, and that are not necessarily reported and quantified. But we estimate that there's at least 165 billion euros per year that are missing to achieve our targets. And the more our targets grow, the higher this gap would become. In front of that, what we offer as public money to deploy energy efficiency investments is, of course, not in itself able to fill this gap. But we estimate that, generally speaking, if you pour €1 of public money, approximately that would cover 10 to 20% of the investment needs in the market. And I think that's the main message of my presentation, is that we are offering a number of financing opportunities, but they need to be accompanied not only by member state intervention, but also they must be able to trigger private investment. Just for a short estimate, what we are calculating internally as European support for energy efficiency was until now around 15 billion euros per year in the previous budgetary period, and it has grown up to 25 billion euros per year in the current budgetary period. So you see that we are providing significant amounts of money, and let me just introduce you a few of the schemes that are being offered. Many of these you will probably know. The first set of instruments are the largest funding instruments for energy efficiency, and these are the cohesion funds and the recovery and resilience facility. The cohesion policy funds, they're traditionally the largest fund provider. It's a big chunk of the European budget, and when it comes to energy, we estimate that more than 850 million euros have been dedicated to energy-related investments in the current budgetary period for Latvia, out of which approximately 35 to 40% was for energy efficiency. And that has been estimated for the specific objective of energy efficiency within the cohesion funds, and also the relevant parts of the Just Transition Fund. As I said, this is usually the main fund provider, but what happened is that following the COVID crisis, the European Union decided to put in place a huge recovery and resilience facility, almost 700 billion euros for all member states, to recover from the economic crisis. What was the use of Latvia of these funds for energy? Approximately 500 million euros, which is a little bit less than 25% of the total funding offered to Latvia under the recovery and resilience plan, and more than half of it for energy efficiency categories. So that means that there is really a focus on energy efficiency in Latvia and in other countries as well. But we see that although this is looking very good, we should keep in mind that, of course, the recovery and resilience facility is a one-shot funding instrument. So it's going to stop in 2026, and by the time it stops, we're going back to normal and with the current and with the traditional funding levels. So in addition to that, and that's another message that I would like to pass, it is clear that in many countries so far, cohesion policy funds and the recovery and resilience facility have been mainly channeled through grants and subsidies. And although this is understandable in a way, the main drawback of this situation is that those subsidies are not designed in a way that they can leverage private financing, be it from final beneficiaries or for financial institutions. And that puts at stake the sustainability of this instrument over time and their capacity to be replicated in the next periods. So in addition to those main funding providers, we have a number of other instruments which you may know of. One of them is the Life Clean Energy Transition Program, which is endowed with approximately 1 billion euros. And it really addresses the market barriers in specific sectors, including energy, of course. So the projects that are being funded by Life are smaller scale, and they're really meant to change how the market operates fundamentally. And they try to increase the amount of investment mobilized and the way they are financed. So how does it work in practice? It has yearly calls. I give you an example of the distribution of funds for the previous call in 2023. And you can see where energy efficiency can lie in different categories, of course, but one of them being attracting private finance, supporting EU energy policy framework. But for all of these categories, you may have an energy efficiency component. And just for information, the 2024 call just ended. I think it ended yesterday. But then if you wish to participate to the next call, please keep a close eye at the call for tenders and applications that will be launched in the upcoming month. Another program that you may have heard about is the European Technical Assistance Facility for Local Authorities and local actors, ELENA. It has a very long and successful track record. It's one of the oldest funding programs because it was funded in 2009, and is really designed in a way that it maximizes the leverage, because the technical assistance, which is rather project development assistance, is offered to project aggregators at local level. They can be financial institutions, they can be energy agencies, they can be municipalities, you name them. And they have to achieve a certain level, contractually speaking, of leverage. And the observed leverage of the whole program is 32. That means that with the budget that we had from the beginning, 300 million euros, we have managed to leverage almost 10 billion worth of investments. throughout Europe in most of the member states, and Latvia has been pretty active in the run-up of the Elena facility, because we have one completed project from Altum Bank, JEP, that was for SMEs and mid-cap enterprise, and there's a new one ongoing which is called Energo Grant. Also, the Jelgava project that was run by the city of Jelgava, and that was completed as well, and a new project from the Riga Energy Agency. So you can see that there were a significant number of projects, and that for that you could build stock take stock on this successful experience to develop maybe national initiatives, and I will get back to this later on. Let me briefly mention the European Energy Efficiency Fund, which is a different animal because it's not a funding instrument per se, it's an investment fund. So this is where the European Commission is acting as an advised investors and invests directly into projects, private-public partnerships, or funding in ESCOs or in special purpose vehicles in various projects across Europe, and there are a number of projects in Latvia as well. This is interesting because it really follows a market logic, but this is obviously not the main the most common way of operating from the Commission. But I wanted to highlight that too, because I wanted to show that the European Commission is also in some opportunities market oriented. This was the brief overview of the market instruments that we have at our disposal to finance and support energy efficiency investments. But as I said, there's also an enabling framework, and on this we have been quite active, I have to say, in the Commission in the last years, because within the Fit for 55 package, which paves the way of the European Union towards decarbonization by 2050, we had to review and amend the current legislative framework, and this has been done last year and the previous one. And let me start with the newest one, which is the EPBD, the Energy Performance of Building Directive, which was approved, voted, and published in the official journal last year. And it's really focusing on buildings and renovation, which is the topic of today, and really acknowledges the magnitude of the challenges there. And maybe the first challenge is really to understand what we are talking about and to quantify it. And that's always the same issue that has been faced by project sponsors and member states, is how do you calculate the energy savings? How do you quantify them? And this is mandatory in order to monetize them and to acknowledge the benefits that you can take out of this. So basically, there's a very exhaustive list of regulatory and legal measures that are embedded in the directive, but let me focus on only a couple of them. Article 17 being on financial incentives, skills and market barriers. It really, let's say, provides a mandatory benchmark, or let's say a mandatory framework for member states to put in place the right financial incentives. And this is not a should, it's a shall, and it's really the spirit of this. But what is interesting, for example, in articles in the paragraph 7, is that we make a long list of what member states shall be promoting as effective tools, and within that there's a long list of financial instruments. So that goes largely beyond subsidies, so it can be energy efficiency loans, mortgages, energy performance contracting, pay as you save, you name them. I mean, it's really the long list of instruments that are at your disposal. as a member state. And the other key aspect of this article is really the mandatory requirement to be able to measure energy efficiency. That is in paragraph 14, and that can be done through different means, namely energy audits, and whenever they are not possible or reliable enough, you can also make a comparison of the energy performance certificates before and after the works were conducted. Another article which is extremely important is the deployment of one-stop shops. One-stop shops are defined in the Energy Efficiency Directive, Article 22, but basically they offer a range of services that is relatively broad and that can go from purely advisory services to also financial engineering, financial structuring to clients, and even direct payment through third-party financing. But what is interesting in the Article 18 is that it gives an obligation to member states to develop one-stop shops at local scale, and for example, it has to be at least one-stop shop per region, or one-stop shop for every 80,000 inhabitants. So it gives you an idea of the number of one-stop shops that are needed to, properly fill the network and address the needs of all inhabitants in a given territory. To do so, we are also developing a guidance to member states to help them put in place one-stop shops. And this will be released in the course of next year, probably. And once this is received, member states will have the obligation to transpose the obligations for one-stop shop by May 2026. The other piece of legislation which is important is the Energy Efficiency Directive. It was approved the year before, and it doesn't only cover building renovation, but all the sectors that are meant to provide energy savings to the economy and help member states achieve their targets. So we have a target which is relatively ambitious, a reduction of 11.7% of the energy consumption as compared to the baseline scenario by 2030, and that I'm not digging into this further, but the challenge is really high, and we acknowledge this by providing let's say midterm targets and provide an increasing pace of the ambition over the decade. One of the article, if not the article that is dealing with financing, is Article 30, and it provides a number of elements. One of them is really to push for the use of new financial instruments, so promote energy efficiency lending products by ensuring a wide and non-discriminatory offer and facilitate the implementing of on-bill and on-tax financing schemes. This can be done by means of the implementation of a national energy efficiency fund. That will be in the next slide. But that's also for, to achieve that, we know that we cannot only count on regulatory measures, but we need some pull factors, and those pull factors would come from the involvement of the private sectors and the main stakeholders in energy efficiency. And I will get back to this with one initiative that I would like to mention to you. But basically, in the Article 30, keeping to that, there's a number of provisions that also request member states to facilitate the establishment of financing facilities and also of technical assistance facilities, and these are paragraph 1 and 2, and the requirement to create a national energy efficiency fund Well, it's not a strong requirement, it's not an obligation, but it's a very strongly recommended. And to do so, member states do not have to create a new fund. They can establish a dedicated funding stream within existing facilities. But all of this plead in something that we are developing together with the EIB, is the creation of national LNAs. So the LNA has been so successful that now we are thinking about replicating it at member state and local level. And to do so, you can count on technical support from the EIB and guidance from the Commission in order to put in place a scheme that would more or less have the same requirements as the current ELENA model, and that would help to open to new sources of financing, for example, cohesion policy funds, or or the recovery or resilience facility if it has not been fully allocated, or other sources of national funding, for example, the proceeds from the ETS. And that would be the basis for creating a project development assistance facility coupled with funding for hard investments. So that would mean in practice the creation of a national energy efficiency fund. The other initiative I was referring to when I presented the Article 30 is the involvement of private stakeholders, and that is being done by thanks to the creation of a European Energy Efficiency Financing Coalition. This is a new initiative. It was agreed and launched in April last year. And what will this coalition consist of? It's a multi-layered approach that involves all the financial institutions that are willing to join. It's on a voluntary basis. And it's going to ask them to work together on a number of specific topics that can be both at EU or national level, and to provide recommendations also for the design of new funding schemes and financial instruments. So you can see the three-layered approach, one of them being the top layer, the General Assembly, which would gather the CEOs or the main representatives of the financial institutions, and the member states and the Commission as well. The second layer would consist in the expert group that would provide that would work on specific topics that are cross-cutting across the different member states. So that's EU, the EU dimension layer. And the third layer, which is extremely important, is the creation of national hubs that would be basically roundtables at national level with the local development banks, financial institutions, and other kind of stakeholders, for example, regulators or ESCOs, and they would work together on the market specifics of their member state. And all of this will be managed and supported by a secretariat. So the good news is that indeed the coalition was launched in April. The second good news is that we have opened the call for expression of interest to the financial institutions, and we have already received a number of applications. Application being expression of interest, so you don't need to show anything specific, but just to commit to become a member of this coalition. And we are in the process of creating national hubs in most of the member states. So if you or your financial institution or your member state, in this case Latvia, is interested to join, please feel free to look at the website of DGNR and to gather more information on this coalition. With this, I think I might be overdue, and I will stop here and wait for any potential question. Thank you very much for your interest, and have a great debate day.
Thank you, Adrian. It's good that we managed to solve the technical issues eventually, and I think it was instrumental that we see your presentation first. But are there any?
Do we have any instant questions, any burning questions to Adrian that you would like to ask?
In the whole, but if anything will pop up later, we'll make sure that these questions are channeled either to you or your colleagues with the help of somebody here in the hall in Latvia, more than 2,000 kilometers away. So okay, thank you very much for your. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's a good overview of what is available on the macro scale, and we have to figure out how to channel those resources down to the micro level.